how would you describe the God of the Bible in terms of its conceptualization by man?
Well, of course, there were many gods of the Bible. This is the big unspoken truth of Judaism and Christianity. King David and King Solomon made temples to many gods. They were not monotheist. During the exodus from Jerusalem in the 6th century BC, after the Babylonian invasion, the people who were fleeing from Jerusalem with Jeremiah, the mad prophet, they worshipped the Queen of Heaven. Not the God of the Jews. They worshipped the Queen of Heaven, as it says in that particular gospel. And she was obviously Isis. The Queen of Heaven is Isis. They were venerating an Egyptian goddess, Isis. There were many gods, even within Judaism. The God of the Jews is called Elohim, which is a plural, which is interesting. Allah, the same as the Muslim God. He was called Shaddai, the God of destruction, who is obviously Seth within the Egyptian pantheon. Yahweh, the moon god, the god of the moon in Egypt was called Yah. So Yahweh was the moon god. And Aten, the Jewish god, was called Aten, which is the god of Pharaoh Akhenaten. It's the same god, it's the sun god. The rising sun god was called the Aten or the Aden. And the Israelite god was called the Arden. And yet people won't mention that. I had to find that out myself, actually, because I didn't read about it in any of the reference books I was sort of looking up on this subject. I never actually found that. And I was actually reading the original text in Aramaic, which is very difficult because I don't speak Aramaic, but I know how to look up words and I know how to use a dictionary and I know how to pronounce Aramaic words, even if I don't understand their meaning. And I kept coming across Arden and I think, who's this Arden guy? And so I look it up with my dear old Adam Clark, who's a great reference for anything in the Old Testament or New Testament. And he gives a nice explanation of who the Arden was. And even he didn't connect Arden with the god of Akhenaten. But it was quite obvious that they were using, because the characters are the same, the events are the same, and if you look at the history of Manetho, they are most definitely the same, that the Israelite god called Arden was the Arden or Aten of Pharaoh Akhenaten, because Akhenaten was the first of the monotheists. That's where monotheism comes from. It comes from him. And so the monotheism of Moses and Aaron is the monotheism of Akhenaten and his brother Moses, because the brother of Akhenaten was called Moses. And so we have a complete synergy between these two texts and these two stories. And so, yeah, what was the original question? Where does it come from? I forget what the question was.
Yeah.
Within society. Yes, so
was in relation to the conceptualization of the God of the Bible by man.
Yes, so it's a synthesis of all of the gods of Egypt. Egypt obviously had many gods. But those many gods cause contentions within society. Pharaoh Akhenaten understood that, and he thought, well, it would be much better if we get rid of the images of the animals, which had caused this contention between these groups, and the names of these gods, and if we amalgamate them all into one and have monotheism under the image of the sun god, or the power of the sun god, then we'll have less contention in the land. And so he created monotheism out of polytheism. And that was a problem, because all of those aspects of the polytheist religions before all had to be stuffed into one God. And of course, that caused bulges and contentions within that monotheism, because it didn't all agree. We've got aspects of moon worship and sun worship within the Israelite God, which all have to be forced together into one artificial monotheistic religion. And that's why we get so many different explanations about what this monotheist God is. It's much easier to think of it as a polytheism, which has been forced into one.
Thank you, Ralph. Clearly, you can tell that I threw